We all know that South Africa is one of the most unstable countries in the world, but today we're about to find out why no one can actually fix South Africa. So shout out to the channel that you see on the screen. All credits goes to them. Guys, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and look at the channel to 3.1,000 subscribers. Without further ado, let's flip and begin.
April 1994, Pretoria. Nelson Mandela is elected president of South Africa. A freedom fighter who spent 27 years in prison, his election marks the end of white apartheid rule.
Okay.
It's a moment of hope for a new beginning for a new nation. But fast forward to the present, and that hope is gone. South Africa today is the most unequal country in the world. It has the second highest level of unemployment and among the highest murder rates globally. It's a country blessed with abundant natural resources.
We have one of the highest murder rates in South Africa. What? I didn't knew that. I know that South Africa is one of the dangerous countries in the world, but high. Oh my God, let's go.
67% of the population lives below the poverty. It's a country blessed with abundant natural resources, but where 67% of the population lives below the poverty line.
Okay, this is a serious video. I'll be serious from now on. Let's go.
Basic infrastructure is falling apart. How did this happen? In this video, we tell the story of how the country went from national liberation to economic catastrophe, and ask how, if ever, it can turn this nightmare around. I'm Andrew for 220, and this is South Africa, the dream that didn't last.
Chapter 1.
It's impossible to talk about South Africa today without using one word: apartheid. The system of white minority rule that ran from the 1940s all the way to the early 90s. It was a form of racial segregation that politically and economically subjugated the black African majority as well as other ethnic groups.
Okay.
Apartheid didn't just come out of nowhere though. It had its roots in the British colonial system that governed the country until 1931. As early as 1913, the British passed laws limiting where people could live and buy property, restricting black Africans, who made up 70% of the population, to only 7% of its land. But the system really took shape following the election of Prime Minister F.D. Mallon in 1948. A hardcore Afrikaner nationalist, his government introduced apartheid in its fullest.
To be honest, even now, this pisses me off. When we learn this in economics or in history, it still makes me mad. The fact that how white people came to Africa and they colonized us.
They classified citizens into a strict racial hierarchy, banned intermarriage, and segregated housing and employment opportunities by race. Black people had no voting rights, no political representation, and no economic opportunity. And from 1970, they didn't even have citizenship. This unsurprisingly created an incredibly unequal society. By the mid-1980s, the average life expectancy for black South Africans was only 58 years, versus 72 years for whites. In education, the government spent 88% less on black children than on white children. And in some sectors of the economy, such as manufacturing, black Africans...
Oh my God, this makes me mad. I know that is way back in 1980 something, but it still makes me mad for some reason. But
1% less than their white counterparts in the same industry. But a system that denied even the most basic rights to its own citizens couldn't last forever. So by the 1990s, amid fierce civil disobedience at home, led by groups like the ANC or African National Congress, and international sanctions from most Western countries, the situation became untenable. The Afrikaner government, by this point led by President F.W. de Klerk, knew that time was up. De Klerk eased restrictions on black political opposition and released leaders like Nelson Mandela from prison, paving the way for universal suffrage at the 1994 election. Mandela, by now the leader of the ANC, won that election, marking a historic return to democracy. So apartheid was now over, but the task facing the ANC was immense. They didn't just have to turn over a new leaf, they had to rebuild an entire society. And they failed, catastrophically. The ANC's whole purpose was to fix inequality. But get this, since the end of apartheid, the wealth share owned by the top 10% has actually increased, rising to a massive 90% by 2010. This insane stat puts South Africa far ahead of other crazily unequal countries like Russia and the US. In 2023, the average white household earned around $41,000. That is more than 80% above the average for a black household. And the list goes on and on. Unemployment has surged, and per capita real GDP is actually lower than it was 20 years ago. Put really simply, the ANC inherited a country scarred by decades of apartheid, but instead of fixing it, they ran it even further into the ground. And after more than 30 years in government, it is ordinary South Africans who are paying the price.
Chapter 2.
The thing is, South Africa's future didn't just vanish. No. It was quite literally stolen by the greed and corruption of its own government. And if there's one thing that best encapsulates the country's descent into the abyss, it's Eskom, South Africa's state-owned energy company. So let me tell you a story. The day is the 30th of December, 2022. Andre de Ruyter, the CEO of Eskom, is at the company's offices outside Johannesburg. It was a normal day. Emails, meetings, coffees. But suddenly everything changes. De Ruyter becomes dizzy and confused. He starts vomiting and collapses and is rushed to the doctor. The diagnosis? Cyanide poisoning. De Ruyter survived, but the conclusion was inescapable. De Ruyter had become CEO of Eskom in 2020 and had led a massive crackdown on corruption and fraud at the company. And along the way, he had made some pretty powerful enemies, some of whom clearly wanted him dead. Eskom had gone from being the backbone of the South African economy to the personal piggy bank
that's what
of
you
its
must expect. Like, that's what you must expect if you like have money. Like, always be a lookout, because people want you there no matter what. Like for example, the government, the whole Motsepe, those powerful people in South Africa. Me, for example, people want me dead because I'm the most handsome nigga to ever step foot in South Africa,
parasitic elite. The company once produced Eskom had gone from being the backbone of the South African economy to the personal piggy bank of its parasitic elite. The company once produced 95% of the country's electricity, but by 2023, South Africa suffered from power blackouts on 290 of the 365 days in that year, costing the economy more than $175.5 billion.
No, there is no way. Oh my God, that's basically like a whole year without electricity. What?
The company once produced 95% of the country's electricity, but by 2023, South Africa suffered from power blackouts on 290 of the 365 days in that year, costing the economy more than $175.5 billion in lost output. And here's the thing, these rolling blackouts, which South Africans call load shedding, were the direct result of years of theft and mismanagement by successive ANC governments. Systematic corruption, particularly during the Jacob Zuma presidency, saw millions of dollars extracted from the company in crooked contracts and procurement deals in a process that investigators are called state capture. So let's take an example. One of the biggest beneficiaries of state capture in South Africa was an Indian family called the Guptas. Arriving in South Africa in 1993, the Gupta brothers quickly established themselves as some of the most successful businessmen in the country, building an empire that spanned media, mining, infrastructure, and more. Their main mining interest was called Tegeta Exploration and Resources. And here's the thing, the Guptas just happened to be pretty good mates of President Zuma, and they used this connection to win Tegeta contract to supply coal to Eskom, totaling more than $235 million. In one of these contracts, Eskom agreed to buy $24 million of coal for its power plants, despite knowing that the coal wasn't even usable. And in another, Eskom agreed to prepay Gupta businesses $94 million to finance the purchase of another mining company, Optimum Coal.
Okay, sorry, let me be honest, I am losing what just happened. Let me go back for a little bit. I'm sorry.
Mining, infrastructure, and more. Their main mining interest was called Tegeta Exploration and Resources.
Okay.
The thing, the Guptas just happened to be pretty good mates of President Zuma, and they used this connection to win Tegeta contract to supply coal to Eskom, totaling more than 230.
Okay, so Eskom bought coal from these Gupta brothers, paying $235 million, which in rands is like billions of rands, of course. Let's go.
$5 million. In one of these contracts, Eskom agreed to buy $24 million of coal for its power plants, despite knowing that the coal wasn't even usable. And in another,
why the hell you spend that so much money, but you already know that the coal is not usable.
And in another, Eskom agreed to prepay Gupta businesses $94 million to finance the purchase of another mining company, Optimum Coal. The deal made a fortune for the Gupta consortium, which just happened to include President Zuma's own son, who took home $20 million from it. Isn't that just an amazing coincidence?
What?
The Zondo Commission, set up to investigate corruption under Zuma, estimated that in total, 57 billion rand, or around $3.4 billion, was extracted from the state through these dodgy deals, with more than 97% of this coming from Eskom and Transnet, the state-owned rail and port company. And what makes this unique is that the rot wasn't just at the top, it was at pretty much every level. Thieves literally stole coal, fuel oil, and equipment from Eskom plants, with losses reaching more than $55 million.
So this is by far one of the biggest reasons why in South Africa we have load shedding
per month. The result of the corrupt deals and theft was that by 2023, a massive 45% of Eskom's installed capacity was out of action due to breakdowns or maintenance, wiping as much as 1.8% off GDP that year alone. The decline of Eskom is a symbol of how the marriage of politics and big business pushed the country over the edge. And it took South Africa from being one of the world's largest coal and energy producers to a country that could barely keep the lights on.
Like, yeah, like, oh my God. Like, we supply so much coal here in South Africa. Like, we have so much coal, but at the same time, we have load shedding. What is happening?
The ANC's leadership hasn't just been corrupt. It's also been defined by naive economic policymaking that's worsened the very problems it was meant to solve. So when the ANC came to power after apartheid, their main task was to put the country's wealth back in the hands of its people, specifically the black majority. Their flagship policy for this was called Black Economic Empowerment, or BEE.
Yes.
And the goal was simple.
Triple
They needed to
BEE.
increase black participation in the economy. At the core of BEE is the idea of a scorecard for firms, which is used to determine eligibility for licenses, permits, and contracts with state and public entities. And this is quite literally what it sounds like. Firms are awarded points across 5 different elements, ranging from black ownership, to management, to black-owned suppliers, to their overall public welfare initiatives. And this policy was clearly well-intentioned, but it's been a spectacular failure, both in its own terms of increasing black participation in the
The
economy.
reason why this organization has been so much of a failure is because of corruption. You know, because people, in order for you to get a job, you need connection. You need to know somebody that knows somebody, there's somebody that knows somebody, there's somebody that knows somebody, there's somebody who knows somebody that can get you work. You understand the type of connections you need. Like, oh my God.
But also in the broader development of the country more generally. So rather than transferring economic ownership into the hands of the black working class, it has instead been handed to a small group of oligarchs with connections to the ANC. By one estimate, up to 1 trillion rand, or around $61 billion US, has been transferred to just 100 politically connected individuals. So let's take an example. And so if you want to understand how this worked, look no further than the country's current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who built a fortune north of $450 million in his post-apartheid business career. He did this by founding
Ramaphosa met Elon Musk. I mean, I know that Elon Musk is from South Africa, but oh my God, I didn't know that.
Did this by founding an investment holding company called Shanduka, which held stakes in, well, pretty much everything from telecoms to mining to real estate. Shanduka got these, in part,
Where is
because both
Shanduka?
domestic and international businesses needed black shareholders to get things done in the country, which meant that Shanduka became the partner of choice for companies like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Glencore in South Africa. Meanwhile, being a black-owned investor allowed it to secure discounted stakes in lucrative opportunities. For example, when Shanduka became a 12% shareholder in mining group Assor in 2005, it bought in at a nominal price of 127 Rand, or around $8 per share, but paid only 85 Rand per share, a more than 30% discount. It sold
What?
the shares to another BEE partner in 2011, netting a juicy $140 million profit in the process, despite selling the shares at a 23% discount to the company's monthly average share price, presumably to create a similar arbitrage opportunity for the next BEE investor. And so, instead of creating a new black middle class, what BEE has done is to create a new oligarchy, and to facilitate the kind of corruption we talked about earlier in the video. But it hasn't just been a failure in its own terms, it's been a complete disaster for economic growth in South Africa. One South African think tank estimates the total cost of BEE compliance is around 145 to 290 billion Rand per year, or around $18 billion US. That's equivalent to 2 to 4% of annual GDP. The need to comply with BEE imposes a huge burden on South African companies, both in terms of sheer paperwork and by forcing them to buy from black-owned suppliers who may not be the cheapest or most suitable. And because the compliance requirements are less stringent for smaller firms, that creates a massive disincentive for growth. A 2026 survey of South African firms reported that 35% reduced net employment as a result of BEE compliance, while 40% reduced new investments and 50% reported reduced reinvestment as a result. The overall impact of this is a collapse in the average number of employees per firm, as you can see in this chart, as well as overall investment in the South African economy. So to put it really, really simply, BEE was a nice idea, which has ultimately become a major economic distortion, crushing growth and deepening.
Like, I understand like the purpose of the organization, but the problem comes with the people that are running the organization. I mean, you know, because you can have a good idea, but if money is the only thing that you want, you will be corrupt. Trust me when I say that.
Inequality. Okay, but let's be clear. BEE, it's not the only problem. It's actually just the most prominent of a set of market-unfriendly policies in the ANC that have held back the country's development.
Okay.
Take, for example, the ANC's 1995 Labour Rights Act. Intended to rebalance the injustices of the apartheid system, it gave employees and trade unions extensive rights around wage setting and job security. And it was great for workers, but terrible for firms. In the World Bank's now discontinued Global Competitiveness report, South Africa ranked 124th out of 141 countries on flexibility of wage setting and 129th on hiring and firing practices. So whilst these laws are good for people who have jobs, they have suppressed overall job creation in the country, particularly for smaller businesses. And that means weak economic growth and rampant unemployment. And it's where the deep irony of the ANC's policy platform becomes clear.
Okay.
The ANC thought that if they prioritized financial redistribution, then economic growth would come as an inevitable result of that. But in reality, this focus on redistribution the ANC thought that if they prioritized financial redistribution, then economic growth would come as an inevitable result of that. But in reality, this focus on redistribution...
Look, this nigga is speaking like he's rapping, like I did not hear a single word. Let me try to listen one more time,
And it's where the deep irony of the ANC's policy platform becomes clear. The ANC thought that if they prioritized financial redistribution, then economic growth would come as an inevitable result of that. But in reality, this focus on redistribution has crushed economic growth and employment in South Africa and harmed exactly the people that it was meant to help. South Africa is a tragic case of wasted potential. The country is blessed with extensive natural resources.
Yo, that is facts. Like, we are blessed with so many natural resources, but we're one of the purest countries in the world.
But after years of mismanagement and corruption by its government, it has struggled to move on from its dark apartheid past. However, there's also a recent case for optimism. In the 2024 election, the ANC actually lost its 30-year parliamentary majority, forcing it into a coalition with several other parties. This new unity government has enacted structural reforms to try and turn the ship around. Chief amongst these is repairing the country's decaying energy and transport infrastructure, as well as reining in government borrowing. And these early steps are starting to bear fruit. In November last year, South Africa's sovereign credit rating was upgraded for the first time in 20 years. And in June, it posted its third consecutive fiscal surplus, beginning the process of bringing down its debt burden. Things are even getting better at long-suffering Eskom too. After reforms to clean up Eskom and open up the generation market to private competition, South Africa saw 0 days of blackouts last year. The state utility now even produces a power surplus. And on the railroads, freight capacity started to climb again following market liberalization, with 20 million tons of extra capacity expected by the end of next year. These green shoots of economic hope are young and fragile, but they demonstrate that the country's problems can be solved with time and pragmatic thinking. And so a successful economic turnaround for South Africa will depend on the survival of this current, more pro-business coalition to chart a transparent, pro-market course. In 2014, then-President Jacob Zuma claimed that the ANC had a divine mandate to rule the country for eternity. But as South Africans see the possibilities of a prosperous future without the party, the ANC should remember that nothing lasts forever. Subscribe to 2 and 20 for more on economics.
Yeah, make sure to check out 2 and 20. I got this video from him. Hey, shout out to him. By the way, it is possible to fix a country step by step.